It is Monday, May 25th, 2021. I'm here in the quarantine. This is James Sims. You already know. Welcome to my new installment of the day. And I want to thank you if you actually listen to my other ones. And even if this is the first one that you're listening to, I appreciate it. So here's what I'm going to do. So even though college football isn't coming back for a bit, I'm a really big college football fan. And because it's one of my earlier segments, I kind of wanted to get this out the way. So when it comes to sports, I'm not personally the one to rank players, organizations, sporting programs so easily. But what I'm able to do is I can put them into tiers because I think once there are certain teams that hit certain thresholds to where they're in a class with only a few other. So right now I'm going to go into college football and I'm going to talk about what I think are the tier 1 programs in America. Programs that have had championship history. They're able to hire the best coach available at whatever time. They have the money, resources necessary to send top prospects straight from high school to the pros. And there are programs that I think that have crossed a certain threshold where at one point they were either historically great or even currently teams that are consistently in the hunt for one of the best teams in America. So you'll understand it as I really get into this. And then even within the tier 1 programs, because I think the tier 1 programs are the top programs at any given time in college football history. But I think there's a tier 1A as in the teams that are winning right now. And you have the teams that are kind of either one coach away or they're one coach removed from being a national powerhouse. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this and I'm going to take it conference by conference. And I'm going to start with the 1Bs. And even though the 1Bs will give up the 1As, but you'll eventually know who the 1As are at the end. So first, because we know that these teams are from Power 5 divisions, I'm going to start with the one tier 1 college football program that isn't in a Power 5 conference, and of course that's Notre Dame. As an independent school with no Power 5 affiliation, they're the only team to have a partnership with NBC that films all their games. They make more revenue than almost every other college football program combined, and because they're centrally located, they're able to basically grab recruits from all sides of the nation, and they're able to they usually have the money available to pay the most expensive coaches in college football, and it's shown. They really kind of dominated college football in the early 1900s, and even now they've been able to stay very, very relevant. They have their own fan base despite being in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. I appreciate the program that they've come to. I think they're a tier 1B because they're simply removed from competing for a title every single year. And yes, Notre Dame is usually tough. They usually have a tough schedule every year, and they usually bring in top tier recruits. But in the same way, they're not really winning and delivering at the same level that these other programs are. So that's all I'm kind of saying. I'm going to get into that probably a little later. But moving to the next program, starting with the Pac-12, I think the only tier 1 college football program in the Pac-12 is USC. Even if you search north, I don't think Oregon's a tier 1 because they're not consistently bringing in the money that in college football that USC is, aside from just Phil Knight going there, if that makes any sense. Same with Stanford. I feel like Stanford's too on and off. I think their lows are too low, and I don't think they've really been a dominant football program like USC and Notre Dame have. I don't think they have, in terms of in the football world, they don't have as much name recognition as the USC Trojans. Same with UCLA, the crosstown rival. I lived in LA, so and everyone in LA knows it's a USC football town. That's really how big USC is. They produce Heismans, they produce top level NFL talent year in and year out. USC is definitely one of the great historic collegiate programs, one of the more winning programs. And even though they're probably at their lowest point that they've been in a very, very long time, I believe in the USC football program enough that they will basically change course and they will find the right coach to lead them back into being a tier 1A program again. That's what the USC Trojans football program is. And like I said, even though they're at their lows now, the USC Trojan college football program is one to really keep an eye on year after year because they're always a fun program to watch. You never know what's going to happen next, especially at this school. Next, if we're going to transition to the Big 12, I think there's two teams in the Big 12 that are tier 1B. I think Oklahoma is a tier 1B simply because as of right now, even though they're the best team in the Big 12, they're not producing national championships. They're producing Heismans left and right, or they're producing Heisman candidates left and right. Of course, Lincoln Riley's running an amazing offense, took over for Bob Stoops, and has kept Oklahoma basically in the conversation for title contenders. I think they're the top of the tier 1B group right now, because they're the ones that are consistently getting into the college football playoff, and I give them their preps for that, running through Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and now Jalen Hurts, and we'll see what quarterback's going to come up next for Oklahoma and just run the Big 12 for the next couple of years. And I think a part of it goes to their defense, but consistently they are able to recruit in a very tough area to recruit, of course, because it's bordered with Texas, and it kind of has the Midwest. It kind of has to share the Midwest with some of the Big Ten schools as well. But I think that I think that Oklahoma has done amazing giving their resources, and I think that Lincoln Riley is an elite coach. And I think Oklahoma is one step away from getting into the 1A level, but I think that they're not as far as everyone thinks. Oklahoma is still a 1B program technically because they're not winning. They're not bringing the championships home as in this current in this era, in this current span. Next, I also think the Texas Longhorns are elite. The Longhorns are another team that's kind of been off recently, but they have the hottest recruiting bed in all of America. They have their own Longhorn network with ESPN. They make more revenue than any other college football program. I've been on that campus. Austin is very, very, very big into UT football. The state of Texas is big into UT football. The world that watches college football is very big into college. It takes a second to get over the burnt orange, but then when you see the talent that Texas produces, even now, they're kind of like USC where they're not near their top, but they're still producing NFL level talent consistently. They still have control over one of the hottest recruiting spots in all of football. All they need is for Tom Herman to turn it around, and I really, really like Tom Herman. I like what he did with Houston. I think they're a better team than when Charlie Strong was there already. Now he just needs to find a quarterback that can really lead this Texas team because they have the talent. They have the players. Tom Herman's an amazing recruiter. He recruited Ed Oliver when Ed Oliver was a 5-star, and he could have gone anywhere, but he went to Houston. Tom Herman is getting the players necessary to build Texas up back into a powerhouse. And if you're watching the Big 12, and if you're watching Oregon, at least watch them play Texas. Texas has taken Oregon to the line in these last couple of seasons. I would not underestimate Texas as a college football fan. And then from that, I'm going to shift up to the Big Ten in the Midwest. First, I'm going to start with Michigan. I think that Michigan's still an elite program. Of course, they have the biggest college football stadium in sports, seating about, 120,000 people, which is ridiculous. I've seen the campus. This is another big football town. You see Heismans, you see NFL Pro Bowlers, all this talent coming out of Michigan. They have Jim Harbaugh as a coach who's consistently giving them about 8 to 10 wins every season, which isn't bad, but I'm not sure yet if he's as elite of a football coach as he is a recruiter, as a leader of men. But that's a whole thing I can really get into with Jim Harbaugh. But the last couple of years, he's been paid as high as the other coaches, yet he's been unable to get Michigan to win the Big Ten since he's been there. And I think that they are definitely better than when Brady Hoke was there. Don't get me wrong, but they're one step away from winning a title, and I think it might be Jim Harbaugh. I think they should spend money. I think they should spend the same money for Jim Harbaugh on another college football coach, but that's just my opinion. And Michigan does consistently finish ranked. People recognize the Michigan football logo everywhere. They have one of the more iconic uniforms in sports, and they're one half of the greatest college football rivalry with Ohio State. And I'll get to Ohio State in a bit, but I think they're a Tier 1 program. But right now they're not winning, so they're a Tier 1B. I think Penn State is a Tier 1 program. I like James Franklin. James Franklin, frankly, does better in the Big Ten than Jim Harbaugh. They went 11-2 this year. They won the Cotton Bowl. I mean, I would not count out Penn State. Of course, they can't beat Ohio State, but Ohio State is Ohio State. But they've been able to pass it off from Joe Paterno to Bill O'Brien to James Franklin, and Penn State is back to their former glory. I think that college football fans are aware of how good Penn State is. And, of course, they have one of the more underrated fan sections. You have Death Valley, one of the hardest college football stadiums to play. They really kind of dominate in that area. Just know that they pump out some quality talent every once in a while. Penn State is a sleeper top-tier program that not everyone watches, but you watch their big games because you know that they're going to give the best team in the country a very, very hard time, no matter when they play. And they've been consistently that great of a program. And I have to say that they're a Tier 1 program, but they're not winning the Big Ten. They're not really holding a flame to Ohio State. So they're a Tier 1B. Another Tier 1B who's not at the best at the top of their game, Florida State. Florida State went the entire 90s only being ranked outside of the top 5. I think they went 4 years while being ranked in the top 5 or something in the 90s. The Florida State Seminoles is one of the most dominant college football programs of all time. Of course, and they won the championship not recently, and they just started to not play as well once Jimbo Fisher left, which I don't blame them because Jimbo Fisher is an all-time coach, I believe, as a recruiter and as a coach. But the transitions between between Jimbo to Odell Haggins to Willie Taggart, it's been tough. I think they should really stick and commit to one coach and let him build his recruiting base because he is still in the middle of Florida with the Florida State name. The Florida State name carries weight, and because there's so many top prospects, especially in the South, that know Florida State, that see Deion Sanders, that see Jameis Winston, and all these Heisman-level players come to the NFL and contribute in the way that they do and see what Florida State actually does. I think people like that. It's one of those programs that rings. If you're a top player in the country and you get a Florida State offer as a high school prospect, that means you're a really, really good high school player. That's all I'm really saying. But they're definitely not at their best. But I know a lot of people around the world will follow Florida State wherever they go and watch them in whatever stadium they're playing in, even if they played in Hawaii. That stadium will be half full with Florida State Seminoles jerseys. That's what I'm saying. They're very winning. They're one of the more winningest programs in college football, and because they're in such a high recruiting round, and they have the money to really get any coach they want to. And once they're back on top, they're an unstoppable juggernaut that college football sees time and time again. Let's see, the other team in the ACC that I would say is Tier 1B is Miami. Miami is, just like Florida State, one of the most dominant college football programs historically. They have the money, they have the name recognition, and they're in Miami, one of the hottest recruiting areas in America, where if you saw the U documentaries on the ESPN, you can see that they were able to get most of the best recruits that were in Southern Florida, that were south of UF, and they were still able to compete consistently for titles and championships. And this year they're getting they were getting better under Mark Richt, but Manny Diaz, I don't know what he's doing. I think they have the money. I think they're another team that should go all in and pay top dollar for an elite level college football coach that will bring them up to how good they were. Because when the Miami Hurricanes are good, they're also an unstoppable juggernaut that continually pumps out NFL talent, Heisman talent, and players that are main contributors on Super Bowl teams. They've had some of the most dominant lineups in history, but of course they've been in trouble here and then, but Miami football should most definitely be back eventually. But to me, they're a top tier program. They have the money, they have the resources, they have everything necessary. They've shown in the past that when they have everything going, they're very unstoppable on the recruiting and the coaching standpoint in a tough conference. But as of right now, they're not at that level yet. They're not winning. So, as I transition to the SEC, I will say that yes, the teams I skipped over thus far are Ohio State and Clemson. And then I'm gonna cover the SEC, where the two 1A programs are obviously LSU and Alabama. But I'm just gonna cover the 1B programs that I see in the SEC right now. And the first is Florida. I know everyone remembers, even I remember when Florida was dominant, when Urban Meyer was the coach, and that kind of proves my point that Florida is in a great location. They have name recognition. If you get a Florida offer, that means you're an amazing high school player. I'll repeat that again. But they're also a program that has shown that when they get a top dollar coach, they can give you top dollar results. They're another program that kind of sits and waits, kind of like a real alligator. They just wait for a coaching prospect to hit the market. They jump on it as soon as they possibly can, and they just produce. I think Dan Mullen, I think he's getting a lot better. I think he's a lot better than Jim McElwain. I like that Florida's getting a lot better without much big name recognition, which means he's an amazing college football coach. Well, we'll see if he has the recruiting ability to top, let's say, an Urban Meyer, a Nick Saban, a Coach O. I think Florida is most definitely there. They're knocking on the door, but they're not exactly at the top yet. They finished 11-2 in the SEC, in a very, very stacked SEC, which is very impressive. So I think they're not there yet. But Florida, just like Penn State and Oklahoma, they're knocking on the door. They're ready. They're ready to take college football by storm. And another team just like that is the Georgia Bulldogs. The Bulldogs under Kirby Smart are also, just like Florida, a team that's just one step away from making it. And Kirby Smart is an elite recruiter. He's had one of the top recruiting classes in the past couple years. So we're going to see the results of his recruiting in the next couple of years. I think that once he made, I respect the Fromm decision, because Fromm got them to that point and they decided not to change their quarterbacks, even though they had Justin Field and Jacob Eason on the lineup. But I respect his decision to start Fromm. But if he didn't, the Bulldogs already have a championship already. There'll be a tier 1A program, and they would be one of the 5 instead of the 4. But because of that decision, Tagovailoa can't help the Crimson Tide come back and beat them, and now they're a 1B team. They might actually, instead of Oklahoma, I think Georgia might be the best tier 1B team at the moment, because they have that SEC dominance. They're right there. But they just haven't done it. They haven't secured it. But I really like what Kirby Smart has done at Georgia. It looks like he's going to be at Georgia for a very, very long time, and Georgia's going to pay him well, and he's going to have a very successful stint at Georgia. But as of right now, they haven't won the championship yet. But Georgia's also knocking. They're in a great position. They're in Georgia, one of the recruiting hotbeds of America, obviously. And they kind of really just have a state of recruiting to themselves, because they really just share Georgia Tech, and they have the other SEC and the ACC schools around them. But kids from Georgia in the surrounding area, they usually just go to Georgia. And Kirby Smart used to coach with Nick Saban, so he can recruit he knows how Nick Saban recruits these kids. He knows how to get along with young recruits. He knows how to make them act together as one unit. And Georgia is another pro football factory that's turning these high school prospects into NFL ready Pro Bowlers. Georgia's another football factory that's just making a lot of this. That's looking really, really good. That makes college football look really, really good. Georgia is definitely a top tier one. It's a top tier program, but they haven't won the chip yet. That's the only reason I can't place them in that category. And then also the last one is Auburn. Auburn is an elite football program. They've consistently finished ranked almost every season, even in the Gus Malzahn era since he's been there. They've had their ups and downs, but I mean, Auburn kind of runs the same type of football, and they'll usually send the same kinds of players. Like they'll send O-line, they'll send offensive guards, they'll send running backs, defensive linemen, and linebackers, and then a couple DBs every once in a while, but they're not really a quarterback-centric team. But they're still able to get some of the best talent in the South and eventually give Alabama a run for its money every once in a while, which is more than I can say for a lot of other teams in college football. Auburn's also a team that if you take their talent and coaching staff and drop them in almost any other conference, they'd be the most dominant team. But simply because they share a state with Alabama and they share a conference with LSU, Georgia, and Florida, of course, it's tough for them to go undefeated in a season. But Auburn is also a program that has the means and resources to recruit either the next best college football player or hire the next great college football coach. They have history. They have legends that went there: Cam Newton, Bo Jackson. Auburn is definitely one of the top tier college football programs. That once again, if you were a high school senior and your best offer was Auburn, would you be sad? No, you wouldn't be. Auburn is a top-tier program with a top-tier coaching staff and facilities that help turn a lot of these players into NFL-ready prospects. Auburn is definitely a pro factory that even in their worst years, they still pump out talent to the pros and get people to watch them on primetime television. And you can't really say that about a lot of other programs. So from this, I'm going to pivot and go to the Tier 1A teams that are teams that are historically great just like this, that are famous off of their just name recognition and brand recognition alone, along with the fact that they are the top recruiting schools and they're hiring the most expensive coaches, and it's really paying off because they're bringing home championships in this era, and it's really, really hard to win championships as a college football program right now. First, I'll start off with Ohio State. Ohio State is dominating the Big Ten. They basically win it every year, and since Urban Meyer has been there, they've never lost more than 2 games as a team. And then they switched to Ryan Day, and Ryan Day is young, and the players respect Ryan Day. Ryan Day is, I think, one of the next great college football coaches, and he's going to lead Ohio. And Ohio State will win a couple of championships in the up-and-coming years because that's how much I trust Ryan Day and his ability to recruit and coach players at a similar level that Nick Saban does. And I think that's really, really impressive. I think Nick Saban said publicly that one of the reasons was that they didn't want Ryan Day to leave. We don't know. But, I mean, if that's one of the reasons, I believe it, because Ryan Day is showing to be one of college football's best coaches, but he still has to come home and bring the championship win, which he most definitely can. But that's kind of my thing. They're situated in Ohio, middle of the country. They're able to recruit a lot of players from the Midwest, and they're also, because they're Ohio State and they have Ryan Day as their coach and they're consistently in the college football championship, so they're able to recruit players on the West Coast, players on the East Coast, and a lot of players from the South that just want to play in the Midwest. That want to play in the Midwest. They give Justin Fields a chance once he transferred from Georgia. And they're consistent every single year. They're pumping out players that are top 5 prospects, first round, second round, third round. They basically have a player for every round. They're loaded at every position. They're starting to look like Alabama did in the 2010s, and they don't look like they're slowing down. They look like they're only getting better as a college football program. And Ryan Day, in the last 17 games that he's coached, he's lost 1 game, and that 1 game was to Clemson. And Ohio State should have won that game, but that's another thing I'll get into a different time. Another program I have on here that's elite, and I would say is the best, probably the most consistent college football program at this very moment in 2020 is Clemson. Dabo Swinney's been coaching for 11 years. In the last 5. He's won 2 college football championships and lost in the college football championship twice. He's been to the college football championship 4 of the last 5 years as the coach. And many people can point to the ACC saying that the ACC isn't as strong as it once was. But it's still very impressive to get through the college football playoff to the college football championship each and every single one of those years. And you could say that he was blessed with having Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, but at the same time, he or members of his staff recruited them to go to Clemson, and he still had to coach them up to being the best college football quarterbacks in the nation. So I give Clemson its credit for that. It's in the middle. It's in South Carolina, but it's a well-known program, famous stadium, famous fan base, iconic uniforms, good, competent college football program that also another program that just pumps talent into the NFL just based off of its dominance over South Carolina and over some of the states in the South. Now that Dabo Swinney is one of the is probably the most dominant, one of the most consistently great football coaches in college football right now, other than Nick Saban. But Dabo Swinney has inserted himself into the Nick Saban, Urban Meyer conversation. And because we don't know if Urban Meyer is going to come back, but Dabo Swinney is in it to win it almost every single year. I like what he's done with this Clemson program. And Clemson right now is a top-tier program that if you found out that you were going to get a Clemson offer tomorrow, you know that you at least had a shot at playing for a championship, and that's what I mean. This is a top-tier program, and if you're a college football fan, you should watch Clemson's big games, even if they don't play a lot of good teams in the ACC. Watch the ACC championship game. Clemson's a very strong team, front to back, on both sides of the football, which is kind of unlike most other teams because they're great at every position, including quarterback with Trevor Lawrence and all. And Trevor Lawrence's junior year is going to be next year, so I definitely recommend watching Clemson next year. And then I got my 2 teams in the SEC. I'll finish off with the champion, but for now, I don't know how you can't say Alabama. Alabama's been the most. We saw them dominate the 2010s in front of our very eyes. Nick Saban is still not slowing down. He's only lost. The last time he lost more than 2 games in one season was 2010. He's gone the last 10 years, the last 9 seasons, without losing 3 games in the SEC with LSU, Florida, Georgia, and Auburn in his division, in his conference, There's not really much I have to say. They have the top recruiting class almost every year. They consistently make it into the college football playoff because they deserve it. Like Shannon Sharp said, it's the Alabama Invitational. Alabama is just that program that pumps more talent to the NFL, more NFL-level talent to the NFL than any other team, especially within the past few years. Alabama is one of the few teams that sits their 5 stars their freshman year and makes them wait until their junior year just because they're in rotation to come up, dominate in college football, and then just go to the draft. It's a factory there. You come in as a 5-star, learn under the junior that's going to be drafted in the first round that year. The second year, you get a little bit of playing time, but you're not a starter yet, but you're playing under a player who's going to be a top 10 pick next year. And then once you finally make it up in your 1 year, you're going to be a top 3 pick. That's one of the those are the type of players that Alabama produces and makes them sit and wait and learn under a player. Nick Saban is one of the most dominant football coaches you can think of. To me, I think what he's done as a coach is more impressive than what other football coaches have done. I think he's the most impressive football coach. Just period. What he's done with this Alabama program, even though it's already an iconic program, that was Bear Bryant's, that was one of the most winningest before he got there. After LSU, he decided to come to Alabama, plant his roots, and become a real thorn in the side for every single SEC coach, whether it be in recruiting or just on the football field. Fans know that if they're going to watch Alabama, they're going to watch Alabama score a lot of points, whether it be on the ground or through the air. We'll see what happens in the post-Tua Tagovailoa era at Alabama, but I really look forward to seeing it. They're Alabama. You have their must-see TV every time they're on. And then last but not least, the Tier 1A program that I think broke through this year is the 15-0 champ, LSU Tigers. After watching this season and seeing what Ed Orgeron's done with this team, and he's been there for 4 years, so these are some of the players that he recruited there. How can you not label him an elite coach by leading a team that he mostly recruited to 15-0 and producing all the NFL talent that he did this year? Like I said, other programs, because they're already a tier 1 program. They're LSU. They play against Alabama every year, and it's probably the second most watched college football rivalry in all football to Ohio State and Michigan. But LSU, what they've done this season, they probably put together the most well-rounded season that you can that you can put on. I think a lot went right their way. Don't get me wrong, but they were the most dominant team from beginning to end. And then when it got to the college football playoff, it really wasn't incredibly close. LSU was the best team in football this year. Ed Orgeron, in his 4th year there, is already a championship-level coach, and it doesn't look like he's stopping here. LSU's going to keep pushing forward, and I think this is the renaissance, the beginning of the Ed Orgeron era in LSU. I think it's going to go down as one of their greatest coaches ever. He's a step up from Les Miles, and I really appreciate what Les Miles is like. Les Miles is a good coach. Ed Orgeron's a great coach. And I know LSU fans are not mad that they got rid of Les Miles for Ed Orgeron. Ed Orgeron he's now a son of Louisiana. He's immortalized in that state. And this is just the beginning. Orgeron's going to lead that team very far in. They're going to be a tier 1A team for a bit. But that's my take on these college football programs, is that they're all very, very dominant. Some of them are up and some of them are down. And that basically happens in sports. Of course, a dominant program they're not going to be the best team every single year. Not every team is Nick Saban. Not every team is Alabama. Not every team is LSU. But I just wanted to make these programs kind of known, just to give you my take on how I view college football, where as you can tell, I really watch the elite players, the elite teams. Cause I feel like if I'm gonna spend my time watching sports, I might as well watch the best of the best do it. And these teams are the best of the best. So whenever college football's on, I try my hardest to see if I can see at least every single one of these teams, even if they are good, and even if they are bad. So you can say, oh, I remember how bad they were, and I think the part that really excites me about these teams is that they're all of them, even though some of them are the worst in their conference at recruiting, they're 1 year away from being a top-tier program again. Elite, they're all usually just 1 year away, and you never know when that year is going to come. And every single year, when it comes down to the championship, it's usually one of these 4 teams, and usually 4 of these teams are in the conversation, or they're the ones that are competing for the championship anyway. So that's what I was really just trying to point out. And at the same time, if you feel as though there are other teams that deserve to be in there, there are some teams that I snubbed, or if there were programs that I put in there that don't deserve to be in there, I respect your opinion. And with that, I once again thank you. And for now, I'm going to sign off. Peace.